Greetings gamers, Tim Kirk here again, and today I was going to talk about the exciting new role-playing game that has come out, or rather the new edition of a role-playing game that has come out, and you should wait for this. It's Icons Assembled Edition. You thought I was going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. Well, I will a little later in this episode blog, so to speak. I'm also working on another Game Design 101, which I will try and get next week at the latest, but we'll see how things go. Life has been crazy as of late. Now, Icons Assembled Edition is essentially the second edition of Icons. It includes many rules clarifications, many rules language changes that improve the overall quality of explanations and flow of teaching the rule systems to people. Icons Assembled Edition takes many elements from from modules, from the previous rules supplements, and utilizes them in a living, active way to make a game that is incredibly powerful and robust. It was originally inspired by the Fate rules and the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game, aka Phase Rip to most people. And it shows its heritage without being a clone of either of those or a copy. It is definitely its own thing, its own rule set, and it is a really good game. My significant complaint has to do with both the PDF loading times. It is very intensive. I was reading it on my Google Nexus, and it seems to take a long time for the pages to load in whatever PDF reader I am using. It's not the same on the computer, but the Nexus is not as robust as my desktop or my laptop computers. Now, with that being said, that's not my only complaint. Another complaint is what I call the superhero setting problem. There's no setting, which happens and is okay in my book, because I usually build my own settings, particularly with the help of my players and their characters. However, there is an implied setting based on the NPCs that are used, both the heroes and the villains. And this is where the trouble comes from. I saw this problem first significantly in Mutants and Masterminds Freedom City 2nd Edition. And that is when homages to characters, familiar character archetypes that are redone in a new way so that we see new characters fundamentally, have become so much a copy of their original parent matter that it's not even an homage anymore. It's an outright copy. Notably in Mutants and Masterminds, Freedom City was White Lion, who is a copy and paste cut of Black Panther. He's not just an animal avatar archetype. He's literally, we changed a few words and carried this over from Marvel. And that, to me, is a big no-no. It is hard because there are characters that I have seen created that are homages to Batman or Superman or Spider-Man or the Fantastic Four that are incredibly well done. Freedom City 1st Edition and the Mutants and Masterminds core setting, that is Freedom City rulebook for 1st and 2nd Edition. Those characters, like the characters in the 1st Edition of Freedom City, were homages. You can see their relative parentage. Like, you can kind of wink, that's kind of a homage to the original Captain Marvel, aka Shazam, or to Batman, or some other character. But they're homages. They are not exact copies. They don't have the same stories. They're not necessarily the same gender. They don't have the same costumes. They don't look or sound like the character in actual play or in reading about them. You can see who they inspired them, but you do not see them as a copy. That's not true of some of the Freedom City 2nd Edition characters, and that's not true of the Assembled Edition of Icons. That's not necessarily a condemnation of the game, but it does show that maybe Steve Kenson and other people who are involved are spread a little thin on the setting department. It's not saying It's a horrible game and you shouldn't get it. I love the game. I got it. I pre-ordered a print of it. I encourage you to get it because it's a wonderful game. But definitely build your own characters because these are copies. Grudge is definitely a thinly veiled copy of Solomon Grundy from the Justice League cartoon. Let's cut to the chase. That's what it is. Other characters, like many of the characters from the original books are not. But again, it's the same thing with Freedom City 2nd Edition. There are outright writers who have no real original innovation in that character archetype. Now, that may be said of some of my setting when I get it out there. I don't know. I know I'm trying very hard to avoid the characters being so much homage that it's obvious. But in a setting or a game that is focused on a setting that is very full of archetypical and cliche characters, it's very hard to avoid them completely. For example, I know for a fact that Shadow Scarab will be compared to Batman. That's one of my characters, Shadow Scarab. He's got some similarities, yes, but he's got many differences and a different feel to him that's intentional. He wasn't intended to be a copy of Batman, it's just he's got the same Dark Avenger archetype, and there's only so many ways to take the Dark Avenger archetype and make it unique. And I understand that when looking at Icons Assembled Edition, but there is such a thing as not managing to scrape the serial numbers off, so to speak, when you're utilizing your homage. I'll be honest, the closest thing I have to out and out Superman is one of two characters. It's either Lady Victory, who's an android superhuman with a somewhat patriotic theme. She might also be compared to Wonder Woman, depending on your point of view, or my character, the Atlantean. To be fair, he's actually more inspired by the Aquatic Archetype, but the Aquatic Archetype is surprisingly similar to the Paragon Archetype. They're strong, they're fast, they are often very much more capable than would seem based on their power set. And the fact is that Namer the Submariner is definitely one of the first superheroes that was created, along with Superman. Superman beat him by a little bit to publication, but legend says that he was created earlier. So they have similarities. There's the fish out of water aspect, there's the alien in a new environment aspect, and there is the power set, strength and speed, even if it's flight or jumping or whatever. So there's always going to be similarities in these archetypes. But how close are they to the first of these archetypical characters, and is it too much to ask? For example, nobody goes back to Batman's heritage and homages him well, at least. I know of a comic book that has, but I don't know of a superhero game that has. In that case, the Black Rapier, who goes back to Zorro, who is the Dark Avenger type, which inspired in many ways Batman. So too the Shadow also had an impact, and the Spider and similar characters from the pulps. But the earliest version we have, unless you want to go all the way back to the Scarlet Pimpernel, is Zorro. So it is possible to do homages of these characters without doing out-and-out copies, and that's one of the flaws of Icons Assembled Edition. We're getting late in this. I've talked quite a bit about Icons because I love superhero games, but they're not all I do. In fact, I play fantasy, superhero, science fiction, urban fantasy, space opera, anything under the penumbra of the fantastic and interesting. I don't do historical gaming without something weird twisting in there, because I like to be different from the real world, and historical gaming doesn't really get different enough for me. I've played spy games with normal human people that are not, there's no weird supernatural twists, but it's the twist in and of itself is the espionage aspect. Now, the other big news, and which I've saved for last, is 5th edition core rules have been released. A free PDF that give you the 4 basic character classes and the basic races to make a character and play from 1st to 20th level. It's not entirely complete because there are aspects of the characters that you're only given one example of, such as the champion element for the fighter or the evoker element for the wizard, but they are a start, and it will be lovely to see how this document, as it's supposed to be a living document, evolves from there. I'm quite enthusiastic about 5th edition. The player's handbook and the monster manual will probably be purchased by me for sure, but it kind of predicates what happens with the player's handbook's release. Depending on how they handle rangers and other character classes, that I really have a favorite interest in, will depend on whether I use the core document or the full-on player's handbook version of the rules for my gaming. Now, I like 5th edition so far. They haven't messed it up. They haven't disappointed me. They've already given me a rule set that is 100% functional and usable and entertaining and interesting to me. They just have to keep that up. And they will have brought me back to 4th edition because I do not play 3rd or 4th. I've tried them. I've even played Pathfinder, and I am currently in a Pathfinder game. But at the end of the day, they are not something I will pick up and run for my friends. I find them too far removed from what I want from a dungeon crawling game, or a hex exploring game, or a fantastic game themed off the original inspirations of Dungeons and Dragons. And that is a game of exploration in which we have mystery, intrigue, magic, and fighting, which may go into dungeons or crazy locales, or may just go through the wilderness and deal with ruins and magical monsters and that kind of thing, without any kind of historical or dramatic fantasy novel feel. Now, that's not to be said that those games were not suitable for other people or that they were bad. They were not. They just did not fit what I wanted. And because at the core, I want a simple rule set to do that with. If you make the rule set too complicated, I've got plenty of other games that can do exactly that. Generic games, specific games, whatever, that I can go hack to do dungeon crawling. I have Dungeon World, which is not even needing a hack. It's a very simple, very robust rule system that creates an evocative dungeon crawling environment based on players' choices, and the actual play elements creates an evolving situation that I enjoy. Whether 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons can come back to its roots and do that, we'll have to wait and see. I'm very impressed with what I'm seeing now, and I'm hoping it continues, as I said, to be a triumphant return to me to my Dungeons & Dragons roots. I started in 1981. I've been playing D&D since 1981 up until about 1999, right before 3rd edition came out, and then I became burned out and focused on other games for many years. I did try 3rd edition when it came out, but did not find it at all appealing. And some changes in 3rd to 3.5 made that worse, particularly the Ranger. Because I don't see the Ranger as a Drizzt Do'Urden clone. I'm sorry. I want Rangers that are Robin Hood, Aragorn, wilderness warriors who have a variety of different abilities, interests, and focuses. And they're not all running around with 2 weapons or bows. Some of them use maces, and some of them use hammers, and some of them use pole arms. And I want that to be a choice, that you don't have to pick this optimal pre-built concept to make the character work. And unfortunately, that was a problem with 3rd edition, is they have very much focused on optimal builds. And 4th edition was just so far removed mechanically from anything I wanted for Dungeons & Dragons, it didn't work. That's not to say it wasn't a good game. I can see there are good things in it. It just wasn't for me. Anyway, good luck, good gaming. I hope you enjoy this podcast, and I hope you take a good look at the new stuff that's out and enjoy them as well.